Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IS English. In our today's video, we'll talk about 16th Finance Commission because yesterday only the 16th Finance Commission submitted its report to President of India. And you know, Finance Commission is responsible for recommending ways of how to distribute funds from center to state government and to distribute it among different state governments in India. Now, in our today's video, we'll talk about what are the expectations of various state governments are from the Finance Commission on how or using of which formula they should distribute the funds among different states in India. Now, as you can understand, this report which was submitted to President of India yesterday by the Finance Commission, it has not been made public. So we'll do a separate video whenever these recommendations are made public and I'll tell you everything that is important from exams perspective. So let us understand why are we dealing with this topic in our today's video. Now let me show you the PYQ that appeared in 2023. So if you can see this PYQ, you will understand that there are certain parameters based on which Finance Commission distributes on distribution of funds between the various state governments, and this is called as horizontal tax distribution. So we have to identify the parameters which was used by previous Finance Commission to distribute funds between the various state governments. So that is why such kind of a question, it shows you the impact or the importance of this topic from the UPSC Prelims perspective. And as this topic directly relates to fiscal federalism in India, which is done by Article 280 of the Constitution, therefore this topic is also important from mains perspective. Okay. Now the notes that I will be using in this session, in case if you want to download them, and you should because these are important from your exams, you can go to this particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live. And while you're at it downloading the notes, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel also. So let us understand the context first. Why have we picked up this topic for our today's discussion? And as I told you, the 16th Finance Commission, which is chaired by Dr. Arvind Pangaria, they yesterday submitted their report to President of India, which is a report of how to recommend or how to distribute funds between central and state governments. Now, you need to understand, as of now, this report has not been made public because there is a constitutional requirement before it. First of all, this report will be tabled in Parliament before these are released for public's consumption. Now, this report in general, it will suggest recommendations that will guide the distribution of funds from center to state governments. And this is meant for next 5 fiscal years, that is from financial year 26-27 till the financial year 2030-31. So this is what this report is all about. Now, why are recommendations of Finance Commission important or why do they matter? First of all, you need to understand they determine both vertical and horizontal distribution. So whenever the distribution of funds happens from center to state governments, this is an example of vertical finance devolution. And distribution of funds between various state governments, this process is called as horizontal tax distribution. Right? So this Finance Commission gives recommendation for both vertical and horizontal distribution of taxes, which has implications or which shapes India's fiscal federalism. Similarly, by getting this funds from the central government, state government uses it for various financial obligations. For example, it designs welfare schemes, invests in social sector like health and education, and it also is responsible for creation of infrastructure, all of which is regulated or managed by the funds that they get from central government. Similarly, depending on how much money it is provided to the state government, this would determine how much money the state governments would have to spend on these kind of obligations. So suppose if Finance Commission recommends higher share of financial devolution, this would mean that the government would increase their spending. Or if the Finance Commission gives a lower share of financial tax proceeds which will be shared by state governments, this would force the state governments to maintain austere obligation measures, or it might even lead to many states having higher debt risks. Similarly, this recommendations also tries to balance the India's regional equity. You need to understand, in India's union, not every state is equally economically prosperous. Some states are more developed and some states are less developed. I'm sorry. So using these funds, you need to understand the Finance Commission, it also ensures that the states who have less economically developed, they get a fairly or a higher share of money from the central government as compared to the developed states. So this is why these recommendations matter for India's fiscal federalism. Now let us talk about, in very brief, what was the recommendation given by the previous Finance Commission, that is 15th Finance Commission. Now, as far as vertical devolution is concerned, which concerns with the distribution of taxes from center to state, the Union Finance Commission, 15th Finance Commission, it recommended that out of total net proceeds of taxes, the central government would provide all the state governments 41% of central taxes. So this is a recommendation of vertical devolution. As far as horizontal devolution is concerned, which is the sharing of taxes among various states in Indian Union, the Finance Commission, 15th Finance Commission came up with a formula based on 6 different parameters. Income distance, which had the highest weightage, having 45% of the total share, followed by area, population, demographic performance, forest cover and tax effort. Now it is very easy to remember these 6 parameters. I've created an abbreviation, PAF and IDT, that is Pakistan Air Force. India defeated them, and this you will remember because of Operation Sindoor, what happened in the month of May this year. So it is quite simple, PAF, IDT, these are the abbreviations of 6 parameters that the 15th Finance Commission used to determine which kind of devolution, horizontal devolution. Understood? Now let us talk about what are the demands of state that they have made to the Finance Commission. The general demand, which almost all the states in Indian Union had with Finance Commission, that they should get higher proportion of net proceeds of taxes as their share of revenue. So they recommended that tax devolution that you made previously, which was of 41%, you should increase it to at least 50%, which would give states in India the greater fiscal rooms to meet their expenditure obligations. Similarly, many states, particularly the states that face climate crisis, they wanted relaxed borrowing limits. Right now, the borrowing limits which are imposed on state governments because of the FRBM Act, it is about 3% of their gross state domestic product. So as to meet future revenue expenditures or future any expenditures that might relate to climate efforts, the government want a higher borrowing limit of additional 0.5% of money which they need to deal with rising climate shocks. So these are general demands that have come from all states in India. Now let us understand what are specific demands from developed states and from Himalayan states in general. But before that, you need to understand the concept of income distance. I told you income distance had the highest share, that was of 45% of total weightage when it came to sharing of revenues among different states. Now this income distance, it actually measures the gap that exists between per capita income of the most developed state in India and the least developed state in India. So higher is the income distance, you need to understand that state would get more share of funds as compared to the states who have lesser income distance. So this actually wants to ensure regional equity. This wants to ensure that a lesser developed state would have plenty amount of funds which they would use for welfare spending. So states like UP or Bihar, which are less economically developed, they get a higher share of the tax revenue from the central government as compared to more developed state because they have a higher income distance, which is a gap between the per capita income of the developed and the least developed states. Now, this income distance formula has faced many criticisms, and rightly so. First of all, many states, particularly the developed states, they are of the opinion that this income distance, it actually rewards the states who have low income, irregardless of whether this low income comes from higher revenue obligations or if they are not efficient when it comes to collection of taxes. So the higher performing states, they argue that this acts as a disincentive for reforms. Suppose if a state would conduct reforms to manage its finances better, it would not receive higher share of funding as far as income distance formula is concerned. So developed states like Tamil Nadu, like western states, they are of the opinion that you need performance based criterias which is based on their GDP's contribution in the entire India's GDP, or the financial reforms that they might have did, or the kind of efforts that they have put in order to collect more taxes as far as their revenue obligations is concerned. So this is the criticism that the income distance formula is faced. Now in this regard, let us understand what are the demands that have originated from richer and more prosperous states in India, mostly from the western part of our country and southern part of the country. Now these states are of the opinion that we are more economically developed, we are contributing more to India's GDP. and they are also very well managed as far as their fiscal efforts is concerned. So these states are of the opinion that we need to be getting incentivized for these kinds of contribution that we are making for our economy. So in this regard, Tamil Nadu, the southern state, has proposed a reform in the formula that was decided by the 15th Finance Commission. They said that this time please introduce a 15% weight which would highlight the contribution of a particular state to their national GDPs. And at the same time, to compensate for this introduction of a new formula, they recommended to reduce the weightage for income distance from 45% to 35%. You need to know Maharashtra, which is again a state ruled by the ruling party in center, they have also recommended the same, but they wanted it to reduce from 45% to 37.5%. And the arguments both of these states or all of these states have one argument in common, that the current formula, which gives 45% weightage to income distance, it penalizes efficiency and growth, and it rewards a state who has a low income status. So these states, rightly so, want a higher share of revenue because they are contributing largely to India's economic development. Now let us understand what the hilly states, border states or disaster prone states have demanded. Now these states have highlighted some of the shortcomings that they have faced due to their geography. These states have highlighted that since we are located in remote part of the country, the amount of administrative spending that we have to do in order to deliver services to its population, they are higher as compared to developed states. So this means that the total revenue expenditure of these states are on a higher reasons just because of the disadvantage they face from their geographical perspective. Similarly, these states are somewhat lesser developed, which means they face infrastructural challenges. And because of these infrastructural challenges, the amount of ease of doing business in their states is not as good as compared to the coastal and more developed states. So because of lesser ease of doing business, these states face challenges when it comes to industrialization. And whereas when there is less development in these states, obviously their revenue receipts that they get from proceeds of taxes would automatically fall down as compared to more developed states. In addition to that, these states also have highlighted that they are subjected to frequent disasters. For example, states like Assam face frequent floods almost every year. States like Himalayan states face crisis of landslides, similarly faced by states located on Western Ghats. Coastal states like Odisha, they face frequent brunt of cyclones, and because of all these frequent disasters, they have to spend a lot of money every year just to recuperate the state from the disasters. So in order to compensate for their geographical disadvantage, these states have demanded higher share of allocations from the Finance Commission. This should come in form of special grants, higher revenue deficit grant which is provided to the states who have higher differences in their revenue receipt and revenue expenditure, and similarly there should also be a method so that they can get allocations which would help them make their states climate resilient. So in this regard, these states have pushed for higher allocation of the funds, and also they have demanded relaxed borrowing limits which would allow them to rebuild after every disaster which strikes these states. Okay, so these are the demands that have come from the lesser developed and disaster prone states. So let us summarize how the 16th Finance Commission in future will shape our India's fiscal future. Now you need to understand, obviously, when the Finance Commission got representation from various state governments, in order to fulfill all of these demands, they'll have to balance demands which might be competing with each other. So in this regard, the Finance Commission needs to ensure that the richer states who are demanding rewards for their performance, they are provided that, and at the same time they also have to ensure that the poor and disaster prone states who are demanding buffer for their vulnerability needs also to have a certain kind of mechanism which would compensate them for the same. Also, states these days have become a primary driver as far as India's economic growth is concerned. You need to understand, by expenditure method of calculating GDP, there are 4 parameters in which you can understand the contributions of various sectors of economy in GDP. That is government spending, private sector investment, consumption, as well as the difference between imports and export. Now, when the investment by private sector is on decline, you need to understand the thing that is keeping up our GDP in shape is the higher expenditure done by governments, both central and state governments. So states now these days have become primary drivers of capital expenditure, and this is very crucial. If you don't provide states with higher amount of money, how would they have money to spend on capital expenditure obligations, right? And repeated disasters, they have also showed that there is a need for certain mechanisms which provides for transfer of money in order to make these states climate resilient. So this is how the Finance Commission would have to balance competing demands, take care of the interests of both richer and poor states in our country, and follow these kind of mechanisms. Now, one of the advantages that the 16th Finance Commission has that the previous 15th Finance Commission didn't was that the terms of reference or the parameters based on which they have to give recommendation was very lean in case of 16th Finance Commission. So when they have a very lean terms of reference, it gives the Finance Commission more flexibility and more freedom to decide on the formulas that they should fix in order to determine horizontal federalism. And Commission also has now the opportunity to go out of its way and out of the standard parameters to decide on the same. So the outcomes of Finance Commission would determine how it is able to balance the chances of equity, which is to provide poorer states with higher financial freedom and to reward efficiency of a more developed states. And at the same time, they also have to determine whether to follow fiscal prudence or to allow for flexibility in order to meet extraordinary circumstances like the case of disasters. Similarly, the Finance Commission also have to balance certain other priorities. Central government also has higher revenue obligations, has higher capital expenditure obligations. So we have to take care of that, and at the same time we have to provide state governments with the required amount of fund that gives them the frequent autonomy that to spend this money on different obligations. Also, it has to take care of how the national growth trajectory would be like for the next 5 years. For example, if you're giving states government with more fund, state governments would naturally be the driver of India's economy. Or if you allow for lesser development or distribution of funds to state governments, it would mean that the central government would become the driver of economy, right? So this is how 16th Finance Commission and its recommendation would shape India's fiscal future. Now, this is a topic that I dealt with today, is a core topic of polity, and sometimes it can also be used for economic questions for how India's fiscal federalism is. The moot point of my discussion is that this topic is a core concept of polity. But if you have to understand all the important concepts of polity as far as UPSC is concerned, one sure short way to do that is to subscribe to our P2I foundation classes. The name P2I suggests everything from prelims to mains to interview would be covered in these batches. So we have separate batches for students who are looking to give exams in 2027 or 2028. One common thing that you'll have to remember, that is today is 18th of November, and from today onwards we are starting with a new batch, right? So to get yourself enrolled in today's batch, only the orientation class has taken place. You can still take classes from tomorrow onwards from where the classes would begin, but please make sure before making the payment, if you use the code ATS Live, you'll get maximum discounts not on just 2027 or 2028 courses but also on optional courses. Okay, so please do that. And now let us take the question. So I told you the parameters that the 15th Finance Commission used can be abbreviated as Pakistan Air Force and India destroyed them in Operation Sindoor. So demographic performance is a right criteria. Forest inequality is a right criteria. Governance reforms was not of the criteria. Stable government not the criteria. Tax and fiscal efforts right criteria. So 1, 2 and 5 is the right answer. Only 3 which are the right answer. So option B is your correct answer. So this was PYQ 2023. Now, which of the following statements with regard to recommendations of 15th Finance Commission is or are correct? Now, if you just make one statement incorrect in this question, you'd be able to solve this question correctly. So let's see how many of you are able to answer this correctly in the comment section, and the ones who get it right will get a thumbs up from my side. So I'll expect each and every one of you to comment the right answer. This question appeared this year only in 2025, so please do let me know the correct answer. And if you want to download the notes, these will be available on a particular Telegram channel, ATS Live. If you have troubles locating it, you can always scan the QR code. So we'll see each other again tomorrow. Please have a very good night.